Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hello and welcome to the prestigious Golden Pig Awards of Modern Horizons 2. Throughout spoiler season, commanders have been competing for this amazing award. And although there are many worthy commanders, only one will stand above the rest and claim the title of the Golden Pig of Modern Horizons 2. The winner of this most coveted award will receive the Golden Pig statue. This statue was crafted by the finest craftsman there ever was, Amazon. And this priceless award will of course be cherished forever by the Golden Pig of Modern Horizons 2. Now, just a quick note before we jump into the runners-up. The picks for the Golden Pig Awards are completely based off of my own opinions. I'm selecting my favorite picks from this set based off of their design, and your picks might be different, and that's okay. So because this is based off of my picks for my favorite commanders from this set, it's not going to be determining what the most powerful of the set are. If you're looking for that list, well, there should be a tier ranking episode in the near-ish future. And one more thing before we jump into this episode, a huge thank you to Eddie for all the great discussions around this set and on these commanders. And as always, to you the fans, if you find any mistakes in this episode or any other episode, make sure you blame Eddie in the comments below. Just kidding, but seriously. Anyways, with that said, let's jump into it. So, coming in at 10th place, we've got Surveillance of Sea and Sky. It's a 3/4 merfolk god that costs 1 blue. It has indestructible as long as you control at least 2 other merfolk, and whenever Surveillance attacks, you draw a card. Also, other merfolk you control have Ward 1, which means whenever another merfolk you control becomes the target of a spell or ability opponent controls, counter it unless that player pays 1. So, Svalin has a lot going on and is a very solid merfolk tribal commander. The vast majority of the time in a merfolk tribal deck, she's going to be indestructible and really tough to deal with. If you get a merfolk down on turn 1 and turn 2, by the time that you get her out, she's already going to be protected. And then on top of that, of course, she's protecting your other merfolk as well, giving them Ward 1. Now, Ward isn't perfect protection, and it's kind of like a lesser version of Hexproof. But essentially, this kind of a taxing effect can be a good deterrent from your opponents actually targeting your merfolk. Regardless, protecting those other merfolk is important because when you're attacking with Svalent, you want her to have indestructible, and when she attacks, you draw a card. So this tough to deal with tribal commander protects your tribe, is low to the ground, and is a draw engine for you. So yeah, she's doing a lot of heavy lifting for a merfolk tribal deck. And of course, in a merfolk tribal deck, you've got a lot of other merfolk tribal support with things like Master of the Pearl Trident, Kopala Warden of Waves, and Stonybrook Banneret. Master of the Pearl Trident is a 2/2 merfolk for blue that says other merfolk creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Island Walk. So yeah, a 2-mana lord that is an anthem on top of giving your creatures Island Walk is fantastic. Blue is a very popular color in Commander, so chances are at least one of your opponents are going to have blue, and if not, there are cards that, make something into an island. So this can help you get your entire team through, including your commander. And then Kopala Warden of Waves has a lot of text on it, but basically it's giving your merfolk Ward 2. So this can protect your merfolk, including your commander, making them harder to deal with. And then Stonybrook Banneret can help out in a different way, having merfolk spells and wizard spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And saving 1 mana on all your merfolk spells can really help you out throughout the game. Next up though, let's talk about Seafloor Oracle, which on top of your commander can really help you out with card advantage. It has whenever a merfolk you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So yeah, this can draw you a ton of cards throughout the game. And then we've got some cards that can even help us when we cast merfolk spells as well, like Marrow Reejery and Deeproot Waters. Marrow Reejery says other merfolk creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever you play a merfolk spell, you may tap or untap target permanent. So on top of being a fantastic anthem for our merfolk, this can also help us tap or untap things. So we can tap down our opponent's creatures to help get our creatures through, or we can just, untap our lands whenever we're casting merfolk spells. And then Deep Root Waters can help things get even more out of control. It's an enchantment that says whenever you cast a Merfolk spell, create a 1/1 blue Merfolk creature token with hexproof. So essentially, each of our Merfolk are bringing a little friend along that you know is really hard to deal with. Regardless, Phelan of Sea and Sky, I believe, is a fantastic tribal commander, and I really like the design. In my opinion, it's solid, but not overpowered. It's hard to deal with, it protects your team, and it can provide card advantage. So I definitely think Phelan of Sea and Sky has rightfully earned its place in the Golden Pig Awards at number 10. But next up, let's move on to number 9 with a very different kind of commander and a very different deck that's going to be built around it with Garth the Lion. Garth the Lion is a 3/5 human warrior that costs 2 black-green. He has, whenever Garth the Lion enters the battlefield or a planeswalker you control dies, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal a planeswalker card from among them and put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And planeswalker's loyalty abilities you activate cost an additional +1 to activate. Now there's actually a ton of things going on here with Garth, so let's break it down. For a Super Friends deck, Garth can provide you a ton of card advantage. With enough planeswalkers in your deck, you're bound to hit at least one and probably more planeswalkers out of the top 7 cards of your library. So when Garth comes into play, you get card advantage, and when any of your planeswalkers die, they essentially replace themselves. Now that's already fantastic, but that next part is really what makes this card shine and what makes it unique. Now when you first read Planeswalker's loyalty abilities you activate cost an additional +1 to activate like I did, you might have had to read it a couple of times because, yeah, we really haven't seen something like this on a card. And the phrase cost an additional made me at first think this has got to be something bad, right? Additional costs are not good. But what this essentially means is that if your Planeswalker's loyalty ability is a +1, now it's essentially a +2. And also it means that, say, a -7 ultimate is now just a -6. Because you know, -7 + 1 is -6. And actually, on my Garth Quick Take, there were quite a few questions on this, so I did pin a comment in that episode about the ruling on it. Regardless, because the way that this works, Garth can help you get to your Planeswalker's ultimates in absolutely no time, sometimes immediately. For example, let's take a look at Nissa Vital Force. Nissa starts at 5 starting loyalty, and her +1, which is now a +2, says, untap target land you control until your next turn it becomes a 5/5 elemental creature with haste, it's still a land. And then her -6, which is now a -5, says you get an emblem with whenever a land enters battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So normally you would have to wait 1 turn to actually get Nissa up to 6, and then you could -6 on the next turn and you lose Nissa and you get your emblem. But now if you want that emblem because it's now just a -5 and you've already got 5 loyalty, well, you can just get that right away. Or if you're willing to wait, you can +2 and then easily keep Nissa around and still get the emblem. Or how about Garruk Curse Huntsman? Garruk starts off at 5 starting loyalty, and his 0, which is now a +1, says create 2/2 black and green wolf creature tokens with, when this creature dies, put a loyalty counter on each Garruk you control. And then his -6, which is now a -5, says you get an emblem with creatures you control get +3/+3.5 trample. So again, you get this down, you can ult right away, and congratulations, you've got an overrun for the rest of the game. Or, you know, if you want to keep your Garruk around, just +1 once, and then use the ultimate next turn. Now, speaking of next turn, another one that I want to highlight with a game-ending ult that you can get to in 1 turn now is Liliana Dreadhorde General. Liliana starts off with 6 loyalty, and her +1, which is now a +2, says create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Her -9, which is now a -8, says each opponent chooses a permanent they control of each permanent type and sacrifices the rest. And yeah, that includes lands. So you +2 Liliana, getting to 8 loyalty, and then the next turn you -8, and yeah, you basically just win the game. It's kind of hard to recover when you've only got, you know, 1 land. And speaking of a potentially game-ending ult, let's talk about Ugin the Spirit Dragon. Ugin starts off at 7 starting loyalty, and the +2, which is now a +3, says Ugin the Spirit Dragon deals 3 damage to any target. And then Ugin's -10, which is now a -9, says you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, and put up to 7 permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So normally you'd have to actually wait 2 turns to get to Ugin's ult. But with this, you just have to wait 1 turn and you get to keep Ugin around. So yeah, drawing 7 cards, getting 7 life, and getting probably a lot of planeswalkers into play for free, that's really powerful. Now some other cards that work really well with Garth in this deck are ones that can abuse Garth's ETB with things like Conjurer's Closet and Supernatural Stamina. Conjurer's Closet says at the beginning of your end step, you may exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. Basically, blink your creature at the end of the turn. So yeah, a free Garth ETB usually is going to be a free planeswalker into your hand. And then Supernatural Stamina says, until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains. Whenever this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So yeah, if Karth's about to die from, say, blocking a creature trying to hit one of our planeswalkers, well, Karth is going to die and then come right back thanks to this. So not only do we save Karth, but we also get that ETB again, getting another planeswalker off the top. So yeah, Kartheline has a lot going for it. In my opinion, Karth is a Super Friends commander with a really cool design. Now, that being said, I personally am not a huge fan of Super Friends decks. But that doesn't mean that I can't appreciate the design of this Super Friends commander. The abilities on this card were well thought out, and I also believe that limiting it to Golgari was also well thought out too. If this was a 5-color commander, it would be even more problematic. So regardless, although I do appreciate the unique design of this commander, it didn't finish higher because, well, I'm not a Super Friends fan. Still, Kartheline, number 9 is nothing to be ashamed about. But now it's time for us to move on to number 8 with the very adorable Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. Ragavan is a 2/1 monkey pirate because, yeah, that's a thing and it's fantastic. Anyways, for a red. It has whenever Ragavan Nimble Pilferer deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and exile the top card of that player's library. Until end of turn, you may cast that card. And also, Ragavan has dash for 1 and a red, so you can cast a spell for its dash cost. If you do, it gains haste and it's returned from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. For just a 1-mana commander, Ragavan has a lot going on. You're essentially guaranteed to get this down on turn 1, and it just starts providing you a lot of value. Every single time it hits a player, which it's going to be able to do quite often early on in the game, it's going to provide you temporary ramp and temporary card advantage. I mean, just think of the play where you know turn 2, swing with this, hit someone's Soul Ring off the top, and you get a treasure that helps you cast that. Now, obviously that's somewhat of a perfect scenario, but still, a lot of really cool things can happen with this commander. And the fact that this can get you so many treasures so early can really get you ahead of your opponents. Chances are incredibly likely that at least one player isn't going to have a blocker for a couple of turns. So this can get some hits in for you, and then by the time your opponents might have blockers, you probably have ways to actually get this through. Now, like I mentioned before, of course, hitting an opponent's mana rock off the top like a Soul Ring that you can cast to help you ramp even further can be really helpful, but of course we're going to be running our own mana rocks as well. So again, Ragavan can catapult us ahead of our opponents very quickly with things like Worn Power Stone. Worn Power Stone is a mana rock that costs 3, comes in play tapped, and it taps for colorless. Now in most scenarios we'd have to wait till turn 3 to cast this, but thanks to Ragavan we're going to be getting that treasure on turn 2 and we can cast it then. So if we keep hitting our land drops, that means that on turn 3, if we get another hit in with Ragavan and another treasure, we have access to 6 mana on turn 3. Another 3-mana mana rock that can help Ragavan out, but in a different way, is Chromatic Lantern. It can tap to add 1 mana of any color, but more importantly, it says, lands you control have tap add 1 mana of any color. While Ragavan does give us access to spells off the top of our opponent's libraries, it doesn't allow us to spend mana as though we're any color to cast it, unlike other effects. So Chromatic Lantern can help us cast any of those spells by completely fixing our mana. Another potential card to help Ragavan out is Lantern of Insight. It says each player plays with the top card of their library revealed. So with this in play, our attacks with Ragavan can be more directed. If a player has a more appealing card on top of their library and Ragavan can get through, well then Ragavan's going to be attacking them. Knowledge truly is power. And speaking of getting Ragavan through, there are plenty of ways to do so once our opponents have blockers with things like Prowler's Helm. It says equipped creature can't be blocked except by walls. This is essentially guaranteed to get Ragavan through on pretty much any player. Outside of decks like Arcades, Doran, and Pramikon, well, Wells don't see pretty much any play in Commander. Regardless, when Ragavan does get through, we can make it twice as effective with something like Berserker's Onslaught. It says attacking creatures you control have double strike. Again, since Ragavan has a combat trigger on hit with double strike, if we get through, we get it twice. So that means 2 treasures and 2 cards off the top. And of course, a card like this can make the rest of our creatures even deadlier as well. You can take a Ragavan deck in a lot of directions, including something like tokens, which can benefit highly from a card like Berserker's Onslaught and also Relentless Assault. It says untap all creatures that attack this turn after this main phase, the traditional combat phase, followed by traditional main phase. Essentially, you get an extra combat. So again, like Double Strike, that means that Ragavan is going to be twice as effective at providing us value, and the rest of our creatures get to hit again as well. So again, Ragavan is a fantastic example that big things can come in a small package. For a 1-mana commander, there's quite a bit going on here, and it can get you way ahead of your opponents very quickly. So get your Monkey Pirate to come down and start swinging early and often with this number 8 commander. But now it's time for us to move on to number 7 with Yusri, Fortune's Flame. Yusri is a 2/2 Efreet with flying that costs 1 blue-red. It has whenever it attacks, choose a number between 1 and 5. Flip that many coins. For each flip you win, draw a card. For each flip you lose, Yusri deals 2 damage to you. If you won 5 flips this way, you may cast spells from your hand this turn without paying their mana cost. So this is a coin-flipping commander with a ton of upside or a ton of downside depending on how you flip. And actually that upside is pretty absurd. Again, if you choose 5 and you win all 5 flips, you draw 5 cards and then you basically have omniscience for the turn. But if you lose all 5 flips, well, Yusri is going to deal 10 damage to you. Regardless, chances of either scenario are highly unlikely. Mathematicians out there, please correct me in the comments below if I'm wrong, but I believe it's somewhere around 3%. Though there is a way to increase your odds, and we'll get to that here in a bit. Regardless, most of the time you're going to be landing somewhere in between those 2 scenarios. So you'll probably draw 3 cards and get hit for 4, or draw 2 cards and get hit for 6. So again, this 3 mana commander, though risky, can draw you a lot of cards very quickly. And we actually have ways to mitigate the downside of this commander as well. But first up, let's talk about the best friend of any coin flipping commander with Krark's Thumb. It says if you would flip a coin, instead flip 2 coins and ignore 1. So essentially this doubles our odds of winning a coin flip. This not only increases our chances of drawing more cards and getting hit for less, but it also increases our chances of drawing 5 cards and getting omniscience. Again, mathematicians out there, please correct me if I'm wrong again, but I believe it's going to be somewhere around 23%, which is a lot more than the 3% chance that we had before. So yeah, finding ways to tutor up Krark's Thumb and get it into play are going to be very impactful for a deck like this. But other types of cards that are going to be really impactful in this deck are going to be ones like Basilisk Collar. It's an equipment that says equipped creature has Death Touch and Lifelink. So Death Touch is nice, that is going to make our commander harder to block, but again with flying usually we can get through on at least one opponent. The important part here is Lifelink, because that will completely negate all the damage that Yusri is going to do to us. Even if we lose all 5 flips and Yusri deals 10 damage to us, well, it's got Lifelink, so we just gain it back. For a commander that's got a ton of upside and a ton of downside, well, being able to mitigate the downside is huge. And even if we can't completely get rid of the downside, something like Orbs of Warding can really help as well. It says you have Hexproof, and if a creature would deal damage to you, prevent 1 of that damage. So Hexproof, yes, is nice, but that second part is why it's going to be really impactful with Yusri. Instead of taking 2 damage for each coin flip lost, it's only going to be 1 damage, and that can add up a lot. And of course, with Yusri, we can utilize other coin flip cards like Zyndarsplint, Eye of Wisdom, and Chance Encounter. Zyndarsplint says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, flip a coin until you lose a flip, and whenever a player wins a coin flip, draw a card. So Zyndarsplint can already draw some cards, but with Yusri, it essentially doubles up our wins with Yusri drawing us cards. And then with a card like Chance Encounter, we can win the game with Yusri in absolutely no time. It says whenever you win a coin flip, put a luck counter on Chance Encounter, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if Chance Encounter has 10 or more luck counters on it, you win the game. Again, even just with Yusri, when we're flipping 5 coins at a time, we can get there very quickly. Especially if we've got extra combat spells or extra turn spells like Karn's Temporal Sundering. By getting an extra attack or an extra turn, we can flip even more coins and things get out of control very quickly. If we keep drawing into more extra combats and more extra turns, well, we can win the game pretty quickly, especially if we hit Omniscience with Yusri with all 5 coin flip wins. So yeah, I really like the design of this unique coin flipping commander. It's a commander that comes with massive upside and a huge downside, though you can mitigate that downside if you build your deck correctly. So yeah, Yusri, congrats on your spot at number 7. Next up though, it's time for us to move on to number 6 with Sithis, Harvest's Hand. Sithis is a 1/2 legendary enchantment creature nymph that costs green-white. She has whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain 1 life and draw a card. Sithis is the Enchantress commander that many players have been waiting forever for. And I'm saying this knowing fully well that there are a lot of Tuvasa Enchantress players out there, and currently Tuvasa is the 41st most popular commander on EDH Rec. So sorry Tuvasa, in my opinion, you just don't compare. Though unlike Tuvasa, Sithis doesn't have access to blue, she makes up for that and then some, being a true Enchantress commander, drawing you a card every single time you cast an enchantment. Whereas Tuvasa is just limited to 1 each turn. And on top of that, Sithis gains you life, which is just a nice additional benefit. Regardless, this commander is an absurd draw engine that you can get down right away. In Commander, outside of probably lands, enchantments are the hardest permanent to deal with. So you get Sithis down, you flood the board with a ton of enchantments, filling your hand while you do so, and those are probably going to stick around for quite a while. Then you cast more enchantments, and then you draw more enchantments, and you cast more, and you see where this is going. And things, of course, can get even more out of control with more Enchantress effects, like Enchantress's Presence. It's an enchantment that says, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. So not only does Sithis draw you a card when you actually cast this, but now whenever you cast an enchantment, you're going to be drawing 2 cards thanks to this and your commander. And you can also protect your enchantments when you cast them with Destiny Spinner. She's an enchantment creature, so yeah, you're going to draw a card when you cast her too, and she says creature and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. She can also make a land you control into a giant creature, so there's that as well. And speaking of creatures, though Herald of Pantheon is not an enchantment, it can really help you out too. It has enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain 1 life. So like our commander, this is going to gain us more and more life throughout the game, but the more important thing is that it's reducing the cost of our enchantments. So we can cast more of them in a turn and draw even more cards. And of course, we've got ways to protect our enchantments that are already in play with things like Sterling Grove. It says other enchantments you control have Shroud, and on top of that, we can pay 1 and sacrifice it to search our library for an enchantment card, reveal it, then shuffle our library and put that card on top. So yeah, a tutor that can also just, help us protect all our enchantments is pretty huge. But another enchantment that might be even more absurd is Solitary Confinement. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Solitary Confinement unless you discard a card. Skip your draw step, you have Shroud, prevent all damage to be dealt to you. So whereas Sterling Grove protects our enchantments, Solitary Confinement protects us. And although we do have to discard a card and we have to skip our draw step, well, our commander and other Enchantress effects can provide us with a ton of cards that we can use to keep this around. And of course, there are plenty of ways for an Enchantress deck to finish out the game, and an especially effective one is Sigil the Empty Throne. It says whenever you cast an enchantment spell, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. Again, with this kind of a deck, we're going to be casting an absurd amount of enchantments, so opponents get ready for a giant angel army. Yeah, so there's a reason that Enchantress players are really excited about Sithis. Again, in comparison to Tuvasa, you are missing out on blue, which, is kind of sad. But in return, you're getting a commander that is lower to the ground and can draw you a lot more cards throughout the game. In my opinion, it's just a simple but solid design. So Sithis, I definitely think you've earned your spot at number 6. But next up, let's move on to number 5 with General Ferris Rockerick. I don't know why I said his name that way, but I did, and I'm keeping it in here. Anyways, he's a 3/1 human soldier with Hexproof from Monocolored, and he costs 1 red-white. He has, whenever you cast a multicolored spell, create a 4/4 red and white golem artifact creature token. I love all the new and exciting directions that they are taking Boros commanders. And Ferris Rockerick, who actually now I'm just deciding I'm going to call him Ferris Bueller, even though yes, Ferris is spelled differently, I don't care. Ferris Bueller is no exception. First off, he does have some protection, which is nice from Monocolored. So if your opponents want a path to exile him or Beast Within, they can't. But regardless, he can make you a powerful army simply by you just casting multicolored spells. And in Boros, you've got a lot of great multicolored cards to help you out. I mean, with Ferris Bueller, it's finally time for a card like Figure of Destiny to shine. Figure of Destiny is a 1/1 Kithkin for a Boros. It's got a lot of text, so here we go. By paying a Boros, it becomes a 2/2 Kithkin Spirit. By paying Boros, a Figure of Destiny is a spirit, becomes a 4/4 Kithkin Spirit Warrior. And by paying Boros, or 6 Boros in total, if Figure of Destiny is a warrior, it becomes an 8/8 Kithkin Spirit Warrior Avatar Flying and First Strike. Basically, you can keep putting mana into it to make it more powerful. Regardless, at the very least, with Ferris Bueller in play, when you cast this for just 1 mana, you get not only this 1/1 that can get bigger, but you also get a 4/4 Golem. Again, 1 mana for 5 power in total across 2 bodies. That's pretty fantastic. What's also fantastic is getting yet another Golem when you cast Rip Apart. Rip Apart says choose 1, Rip Apart deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker, or destroy target artifact or enchantment. So yeah, a 2-mana removal spell that deals with a lot of things is also now giving you a 4/4. Or how about one of the best charms out there with Boros Charm? It says choose 1, it deals 4 damage to target player or planeswalker, permanents you control gain indestructible until end of turn, and target creature gains double strike until end of turn. So this flexible card can help you out in a lot of situations, especially that part, where you just pay 2 mana and protect your entire board. Or how about a 2-mana enchantment like Legion's Initiative? It says red creatures you control get +1/+0, and white creatures you control get +0/+1. Luckily for us, our golems are both red and white, so guess what? Now they're 5/5 golems. And then Balefire Liege can make them even deadlier. It has other red creatures you control get +1/+1, and other white creatures you control get +1/+1. On top of that, whenever you cast a red spell, Balefire Liege deals 3 damage to target player. And whenever you cast a white spell, you gain 3 life. So now all of our golems get +2/+2. On top of that, whenever we cast a multicolored spell, which we're going to be doing quite a lot throughout the game, we essentially Lightning Helix. So yeah, Balefire Liege is definitely a candidate for the Golden Pig. But of course, an extra combat spell like Resurgence can be fantastic as well. It says creatures you control gain First Strike and Vigilance until end of turn. After this main phase, there's a combat phase followed by additional main phase. Now you've got First Strike, Vigilance golems that can swing twice. So yeah, General Ferris Rockerick, or should I say General Ferris Bueller, is a fantastic new Boros commander. He again is taking Boros in a different direction than it has been taken. So again, for this multicolored focus golem making commander, congratulations on making it to number 5. But now it's time for us to move on to number 4 with the brand new Mardu Elder Dragon. It's a 7/7 Elder Dragon with flying and lifelink that costs 2 red, white, black. It has at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice it unless you pay red, white, black. And when it dies, it deals 7 damage to each non-legendary creature. So this commander is a fantastic callback and essentially a love letter to the original Elder Dragons in Legends. First off, as a 7/7, it has the exact same power and toughness. It also has the exact same template for a mana cost with 2 generic mana and then 2 of 3 colors. And finally, it even has that upkeep cost that you have to pay or you sacrifice it. Though with what in my opinion was a fantastic design decision and the reason that this Elder Dragon made it to number 4, it turns that downside of an upkeep cost into an upside. Because when you don't pay that upkeep cost, it dies and then deals 7 damage to each non-legendary creature. So if you build this deck as Legendary Creature Tribal, well, you just have a one-sided board wipe in the command zone. And keep in mind, this is a one-sided board wipe that is going to gain you an absurd amount of life. Again, this commander has lifelink, so you're essentially going to gain 7 life for each non-legendary creature on the board. So get your Aetherflux reservoirs ready. Regardless, of course, there are other ways that you can use and abuse this death trigger. For example, let's talk about Twin Flame. Twin Flame says choose any number of target creatures you control. For each of them, put a token that's a copy of that creature onto the battlefield. Those tokens have haste, exile them at the beginning of the next end step. Losing our 8 mana commander and having to recast it can be pretty painful. What's much less painful is paying just 2 mana to make a copy of it, and then that copy dies thanks to the legend rule, and then we get the death trigger. So essentially for this deck's purposes, that is a 2 mana board wipe that gains us an absurd amount of life. Or we can just get our commander back with something like Cauldron of Souls. It has tap, choose any number of target creatures. Each of those creatures gains persist until end of turn. So essentially, if it didn't have a -1/-1 counter on it, we can get it right back into play with a -1/-1 counter, which is where a legendary creature like Fang can come in really handy. First off, Fang has tap, sacrifice a creature, put 2+1 counters on target creature. So first off, we can utilize that to sacrifice our commander at the moment that we need to, and not just having to wait for upkeep. And then there's Fang's tap, remove a counter from a creature you control, create a treasure token. So with Cauldron of Souls and Fang the Broker in play, we can keep getting our commander back and make treasure tokens. But of course, there are plenty of other legendary creatures that can really help us out, like Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight. Gisela has if a sorcery deal damage to an opponent or a permanent in opponent controls, that source deals double that damage to that player or permanent instead. And if a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent half that damage rounded up. So yeah, this doubles up the damage that our commander puts out when it dies. Not too many creatures out there can survive a 14 damage board wipe, which again is going to be gaining us an absurd amount of life. And speaking of absurd, there's Shrolf, God of Fury. He has whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, Shrolf deals damage equal to the excess to any target other than that permanent. So essentially our non-combat damage kind of has trample-ish. So essentially when we overkill a creature with our commander's death trigger, well, we get to put that excess damage elsewhere. And of course, one option is our opponent's faces, so yeah, they're not going to last very long. And outside of legendary creatures, even a non-legendary creature like Brash Taunter can be fantastic in this deck. It's just a 1/1, but it has indestructible, and whenever it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. On top of that, by paying 2 in red and tapping it, it's going to fight another target creature. So if our commander dies, Brash Taunter is going to get pinged for 7. We gain 7 life from that, and we can also use Brash Taunter to ping an opponent for 7. On top of that, we can pay 2 in red and tap it and make it fight our commander, and then yeah, we do that again. So yeah, in my opinion, this brand new Mardu Elder Dragon is fantastic. It is a great callback to the Elder Dragons of older days, and it utilizes the death trigger in a perfect way. It turns that old massive downside into a huge upside, and that's what put it at number 4. But now it's time for us to move on to number 3 with Garth that's Wayne's World. Garth One Eye. Garth One Eye is a 5/5 human wizard that costs Wooburg, so white, blue, black, red, green. He only has one ability, but a lot of text, so here we go. Tap. Choose a card name that hasn't been chosen from among Disenchant, Brain Geyser, Terror, Shivan Dragon, Regrowth, and Black Lotus. Create a copy of the card of the chosen name. You may cast the copy, you still pay the cost. Garth is an amazing callback to the original Magic set with Alpha. Garth gives you access to 6 cards in total, 1 card of each color, and then a colorless card from that set. Disenchant is a white instant that destroys target artifact or enchantment. Brain Geyser is a blue sorcery that makes target player draw X cards. Terror is a black instant that destroys target non-artifact, non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. Shivan Dragon is a 5/5 flying dragon that has fire breathing, which means that you can pay a red and it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Regrowth is a green sorcery that returns target card from your graveyard to your hand. And Black Lotus, well, it's the most famous and most expensive Magic card of all time, but yeah, it's an artifact for 0 that you can tap and sacrifice it at 3 mana of any one color. Oh, and it's banned in Commander, and pretty much everywhere else. And it's on the reserve list. But Garth lets you cast it. So not only is Garth essentially getting around the Commander ban list with this, but also getting around the reserve list, which is fantastic. Because, yeah, outside of Garth, many players out there, including myself, can't afford a $100,000 card like Black Lotus. Regardless, keep in mind that though Garth does give you access to all these cards, he only gives you access to each of them once. Though, technically, there are ways around that, but we'll get to that here in a bit. On its face, though, Garth One Eye is a fantastically designed, fair commander. He's essentially a 5-color toolbox commander that can help you out in a lot of situations without being overpowered. I mean, yes, Black Lotus is probably the most broken card of all time, which is why it's banned everywhere, but you only get access to it once. And since it's just a copy that you're casting, it's not like you can get it back from your graveyard or put it back in your hand, etc, etc. Though, like I mentioned, there are ways to abuse this card, and we'll get to that here in a bit. Now, with Garth, although you are limited to 1 spell per turn normally with this commander, with some untap effects, you can get multiple. And Dramatic Reversal is, of course, a very fantastic one. It says, untap all non-land permanents you control. So let's get you 2 or possibly 3 activations of Garth if you use Regrowth on this. And then Illusionist Bracers is an equipment that can really help you out as well. It says whenever an ability of equipped creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, copy that ability. You may choose some targets for the copy. So more Garth activations is never a bad thing. Now I have said that Garth limits you to each card only once. But there are ways around that with things like blink effects such as Ephemerate. Ephemerate says exile target creature you control, then return to the battlefield under its owner's control, and it's got rebound. Essentially, this resets Garth for you. So if you've already used some of Garth's spells, well, you get access to all 6 again. And while I did say that Garth is a fair commander on its face, of course there's a way that you can combo with it. I mean, it gives you a Black Lotus. One of those ways being a combination of Deadeye Navigator and Fervor. Deadeye Navigator has Soul Bond and says as long as it's paired with another creature, each of those creatures has pay 1 in a blue, exile this creature and return to the battlefield under your control. And then Fervor says creatures you control have haste. Essentially, you tap Garth, make a Black Lotus, sacrifice the Black Lotus for blue, 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 and then you use that mana to blink Garth. Garth comes back untapped, and you can utilize the full suite of cards again, including Black Lotus. And thanks to Fervor, well, you can tap Garth again, make another Black Lotus, and etc, etc. Essentially, with this, you've got infinite mana, and yeah, you can easily win from there. If you really want to cast a trillion Shivan Dragons, go for it. But the easiest way to win is just casting Brain Geyser for a ton on each of your opponents, forcing them to draw their entire deck and lose. Regardless, again, although this commander does have combo potential, I really love the design of it. Again, on its face, it's a 5-color toolbox commander with some really cool callbacks to some really old cards. I never thought I'd see the day where you could actually play a Black Lotus in a game of Commander, and Garth has definitely shown us the way. So Garth One Eye, congratulations on number 3. But now it's time for us to move on to our runner-up at number 2 with Fang Squirrel General. Squirrels are a beloved creature type for many Magic players out there, and unfortunately, they really haven't had a commander until now. Fang is a 3/3 Squirrel Warrior with Forest Walk that costs 2 and a green. It has if 1 or more tokens to be created under your control, those tokens plus that many 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens are created instead. And by paying a black, you sacrifice X squirrels and target creature gets +X, -X until end of turn. Fang is the perfect commander for Squirrel Tribal. Though Squirrel is a tribe that's beloved by many players out there, again, they haven't had a commander, but they also haven't had a lot of tribal support. So this commander mitigates that by making you squirrels for every token that you make, even if it's not a squirrel token. So if you make sapling tokens, you get squirrels. If you make plant tokens, you also get squirrels. Even if you make clue tokens or treasure tokens or food tokens, you also get squirrels. Fang is the perfect legendary squirrel because it not only is a legendary creature, but it also gives you support. It can help you flood the board with an absurd amount of squirrels in no time and take over the game. On top of that, it can help you also easily control the board by just paying a black mana to sacrifice a lot of squirrels to get rid of whatever problematic creatures are out there. With the number of tokens that you can make with a deck like this, it's going to be really hard for your opponents to keep their best creatures on the board. Regardless, let's talk about some of those ways to make a lot of tokens with Fang, starting with Deep Forest Hermit. Deep Forest Hermit has Vanishing 3, and when it enters the battlefield, you get 4 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens, and squirrels you control get +1/+1. So when this comes into play, thanks to your commander, you're getting 8 squirrels in total. And now all your squirrels get +1/+1. That's 17 power in total from one 5 mana card. Now, yes, this will vanish in 3 turns, but your opponents probably aren't going to be alive for that long. Especially if you cast Avenger of Zendikar. It has, when it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 green plant creature token for each land you control, and landfall, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a +1 counter on each plant you control. So let's say that we've got 7 lands in play, we get 7 plant tokens, and thanks to our commander, we get 7 squirrels as well. Yeah, with this kind of a commander and the right cards, we can build an army out of absolutely nowhere. Or, we can build a very powerful one steadily throughout the game with Tendershoot Dryad. It has Ascend. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. Saplings you control get +2/+2 as long as you've got the city's blessing. So essentially on every single upkeep, including our opponents, we're getting a sapling, and thanks to our commander, we're also getting a squirrel. That's 8 creature tokens each time around the board. Or how about the fantastic Ogre Slumlord? It has, whenever another non-token creature dies, you may create a 1/1 black rat creature token, and rats you control have Death Touch. So keep in mind that this not only counts our non-token creatures, but more importantly, our opponents. Every single time one of their non-token creatures dies, we get a rat and a squirrel. And again, we can utilize our squirrels with our commander to kill our opponent's creatures, to then get more rats and more squirrels, and you see where this is going. Or, we can just double or essentially triple up our entire army with Sapling Symbiosis. You can cast it as though it had flash if you pay 2 more to cast it, and it says create a 1/1 green sapling creature token for each creature you control. So again, for every single creature we control, we get a sapling, and then thanks to our commander, we also get that many squirrels. So again, tripling our army to absurd numbers. And then a fantastic finisher in this deck is going to be an Anthem-like Beastmaster Ascension. It says whenever a creature you control attacks, you may put a quest counter on Beastmaster Ascension. As long as it's got 7 or more quest counters on it, creatures you control get +5/+5. That 7 counter requirement is incredibly easy for this deck to meet, so yeah, now we've got 6/6 squirrels smacking our opponents and taking them down. Again, Fang is exactly what players needed in a squirrel tribal commander. It's a legendary squirrel that also helps you by giving you enough support to make enough squirrels to be a squirrel tribal deck. So yeah, there are plenty of reasons that this adorable commander finished number 2. But now we've finally gotten to number 1, and it's time for me to reveal the Golden Pig of Modern Horizons 2. And my favorite commander out of every single commander in Modern Horizons 2 is Lonnis Cryptozoologist. Or as I like to call it, Lonnis Crypto-Cluologist. Lonnis is a 1/2 Snake Elf Scout for green-blue. It has, whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, investigate. And by tapping and sacrificing X clues, target opponent reveals the top X cards of their library. You may put a non-land permanent card with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield under your control. That player puts the rest on the bottom of their library in a random order. So just as Sithis filled a need for an Enchantress commander and Fang filled the need for a Squirrel Tribal commander, this most definitely fills the need for a clue-based commander in a fantastic way. Clues are a mechanic in which there's a decent amount of support out there, but there's never been a commander that can really fully utilize them. And Lonnis does that and also gives you a ton of support by helping you make an absurd amount of clues throughout the game. And the payoff for this commander is incredible. Being able to, at instant speed, tap and sacrifice a ton of clues to get something huge off someone's library is awesome. Because what's better than beating an opponent with their best cards? The more clues you sacrifice, the farther you can dig and the bigger of a spell you can get. And again, Lonnis can make you a lot of clues to make that an even more impactful play. There are plenty of ways in Simic to really abuse and get the most out of that ETB trigger. Regardless, like I mentioned, there are already some good clue cards out there like Ulvenwald Mysteries, Tamio's Journal, and Erdwall Illuminator. Ulvenwald Mysteries can be especially great in this deck. It says whenever a non-token creature you control dies, investigate. So now we get a clue whenever our non-token creatures die on top of when they come into play. And also, whenever we sacrifice a clue, we make a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So essentially now with Lonnis, we can get something big off the top of an opponent's library and make an absurd amount of soldiers. The amount of value that this card can give us throughout the game is huge. And speaking of value, there's Tamio's Journal, which says at the beginning of your upkeep, investigate. And we can also tap it to sacrifice 3 clues, search our library for a card, and put that card into our hand, then shuffle our library. Now, usually this would take us 3 turns to get enough clues to actually sacrifice to go get a card, but with Lonnis, that's going to be a lot quicker. So this is a clue generator and a fantastic repeatable tutor for this deck. Next up, there's Erdwall Illuminator, which says whenever you investigate for the first time each turn, investigate initial time. Essentially, on every single turn that we make a clue, we get 1 free extra one, which is fantastic for this kind of a deck. But next up, a huge kind of card for this deck is a card like Shrieking Drake. It's a simple 1/1 flyer for a blue, but when it comes into play, we have to return a creature we control back to our hand. Luckily for us, we can actually just choose the Shrieking Drake itself. So for a blue mana, we get the Shrieking Drake into play, we get our commander's ETB trigger, then this comes back to our hand. Essentially, we just paid a blue to make a clue. And no, I didn't mean to rhyme that, but it works, okay? So we can keep doing this over and over again, making more and more clues for us to sacrifice for a lot of value. And speaking of a lot of clues, let's talk about Second Harvest, which says for each token you control, create a token that's a copy of that permanent. So at instant speed, we can double up our clue tokens out of nowhere for a really big effect. And with this kind of deck, we're also going to want cards like Expel from Maraska. It has Ascend and it says return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If you've got the city's blessing, you may put that permanent on top of its owner's library instead. So essentially, if a player has a non-land permanent that we want, we just cast this and put it on top of their library. Since we know that card's mana cost, we tap our commander, sacrifice the needed number of clues, and congratulations, that is now our card. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool and powerful things that you can do with Lonnis Crypto Clueologist. Lonnis took a mechanic that didn't have a commander for it and gave it a home and then some. It can help you generate a ton of clues on top of giving you a huge payoff for having a lot of clues. So Lonnis Crypto Clueologist, make sure you're on the lookout for that Golden Pig trophy in the mail. But again, a huge thank you to all the commanders out there that competed for this prestigious award. Unfortunately, there can only be one Golden Pig of Modern Horizons 2. But luckily, or perhaps unluckily for all the other commanders that weren't mentioned in this episode, there's still one more award that is up for grabs. So make sure on the lookout for the next award ceremony with the Golden Toilet of Modern Horizons 2. Who will win this other, not so prestigious award? Well, tune in to find out. But until then, as always, thanks again and have a good one.